All right, everybody, like you heard in the last episode, this is part 2 of our conversations at MOAC, Missouri Annual Conference. You'll hear 2 more really cool conversations. I'm really excited for you to hear them.
Booyah!
Booyah! Booyah!
So Reeves,
Yeah.
you are the person.
I'm Emily. Nice to meet you.
I don't think I've met you yet. Okay.
Well, so I was
Hi,
going to say,
Emily Reeves.
you're the person that I feel like I know the most and the least equally at the same time. Because I've spent time in virtual and in-person spaces. But I don't know a ton of your story. So,
I feel like I could say the same.
Yeah.
About you. I feel like I know you peripherally, right?
Yeah.
And like know lots of like little nuggets. But yeah. Haven't had that.
So
say everything you know about each other right now. I'm kidding.
Okay.
But
Comedian.
Yeah, it might be shorter than we thought.
Yeah, actually, it's a pretty short list, I think.
So, who are you and what do you do? And then I'll have a follow-up question about something after that.
Great. Well, I'm Reeves. I am the director of college ministry at Missouri United Methodist Church. I work for the neighborhood in Columbia. Yes, Missouri. I'm originally from...
I went to Mizzou.
Oh, cool. I'm originally from Georgia. So, yeah, transplant.
Okay.
But that's what I do.
So... College ministry, Mizzou students. Emily went to Mizzou. She was part of RUF.
Cool.
Reformed.
We should talk about that.
We definitely should. I was invited to the neighborhood and I was like,
oh, really?
I'm not going to hang out with the godless neighborhood people.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's
I've
okay.
changed.
No, that's okay. It's really fine. Yeah. I'm glad that we have that reputation, actually.
No,
That's
people.
refreshing.
When I was like, I don't think I'm a Christian. People were like, maybe go to the neighborhood.
Really?
Which I think is beautiful.
That is beautiful.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I had like
you.
students, or one student who always describes it as like the least churchy of churches, like in Columbia, which I'm
a lot of people need that.
Right. Yes, because it's less intimidating. Yeah. Yeah.
So deconstruction, like out of your population, what do you like? How many people are talking about it, and like how much does it form what you guys do ministry-wise?
Right. So it's definitely one of those words that I feel like a lot of my students don't necessarily know coming in.
Okay.
Right. But a lot of them resonate with the idea when we start talking about it. And I will say the caveat of I have one student in particular who always says like they don't deconstruct because they never really constructed to begin with, like really constructed sort of like the ideas that we usually talk about with deconstruction. So like I feel like for some people, like, deconstruction doesn't resonate, but I know for me that language has been like super helpful in my own like faith journey and deconstructing some of the really harmful ideas that I had and owning up to that and allowing other students that freedom to like really just question and be like, what do we think, right? Like, and kind of hold things loosely so that then they can like sort through and kind of figure things out. So we use the deconstruction language, and then also Richard Rohr uses language like, it's escaping me right now. Oh boy, that's embarrassing. I talk a lot.
Well, I'll tell you.
I'll come back to it.
While you think about it, the greatest compliment I ever had was I was compared at the same heretical level as Richard Rohr. I think by someone at RUF. So it was
correct.
One of the greatest compliments.
Yeah,
I was like,
he said, Danny Lieberger and Richard Rohr just boring old heretics.
Like,
Danny was like, I'm kind of honored.
Yeah, I was like, I've never been put in the sentence before, so I'll take that.
Yeah, you can just retire now.
Yeah.
I will say though, I really appreciate that point, which is one I don't think we've explored on the podcast, that not everyone feels the need to have a sort of deconstruction process. I think we haven't really named that deconstruction assumes a level of some building that maybe was created for you originally growing up, or maybe you were a part of it a little bit.
Right.
I just really appreciated that point. I don't think that's one we've named.
It's not one that I had really thought about just because my experience was deconstructing, right? And like I had built up these ideas of who God was and what God stood for, and other people, didn't even buy into that to begin with, right? Or like didn't buy into that particular like version of things. So yeah.
So you occupy one of the most interesting spaces in that you're in a college town at a super old church, reaching young people in the ministry you do. I don't know how much the church as a whole does that or not, but you occupy two spaces, and I don't know, maybe people at Missouri are really like just eyes open, like, hey, but it's old and young, old and new. So like, do you find tension? I'm like, hey, there's these people of my flock that like feel connection to the system, and then people that are like, whether they're deconstructing or not, like, hey, I want to do something new. Like, do you find it hard or easy to navigate that kind of like, somewhat, I mean, trailblazing is maybe the wrong word, but like, I think you're fighting for a new generation while holding space in the old generation. Like,
right.
Do you find tension in that?
Definitely. Yeah, I think it is a very interesting space because, like, personally, I'm not drawn towards the traditional. I'm someone who's like as far from that as we can get. I'm happy, and have really found like a love and appreciation for some of those things, and have found that a lot more of my students connect with that than I would have thought. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have several students who like. So we have 3 different services that all have very different feels. And I do feel like we kind of have the range of like some go towards the only modern and some go towards the like very high steeple feel. And yeah, so I think I'm always struck by the fact that like, I wouldn't imagine that they would want anything to do with our like, sanctuary service. But we have a lot of students who love that and find a lot of comfort in being in a church that has like affirming theology and is still like traditional, right? Because I feel like sometimes we try to separate those two things, but they don't always have to go together. So I think that because of the people before me, they did a lot of the groundwork that has allowed us to not have as much tension in the building as I would have thought. So I think that like before me, there were a lot of sort of internal struggles of like, no, this space needs to be affirming, whether or not the rest of the building is on board. And I feel like we are in a space now where like everyone, for the most part, I mean, every once in a while I get a weird comment, but I think that's going to be everywhere. But like, for the most part, everyone's really excited about the work that we're doing and supports the college ministry and is always trying to figure out ways to like support us. And we're still trying to figure that out, right? Of like, how do we have like intergenerational connection when there's so many differences of like, right? So we're still trying to explore that and figure out like, how do we build those relationships better? Because I think that's so important for everyone to learn. But yeah, it's kind of, I don't know, somewhat uncharted territory for our church right now. So
I think it was Missouri United Methodist. It might be a different UMC church in the area, but I remember a few years back when I was in college, the big Presbyterian church there had a sermon that was like pretty blatantly anti-trans.
Yeah,
and
I remember that one.
One of my classes, they brought in, I think it was a pastor from Missouri United Methodist Church.
Oh, really?
Who literally just came and was like, not all Christians feel that way. And like, we don't think that that's what it means to follow Jesus. And that was one of my first like exposures to like the Methodist Church. And I just thought it was so cool that a professor brought that pastor and really just to say like that was harmful to a lot of people.
So harmful.
And like that isn't every church in Columbia, and there are safe spaces. And I think you guys are doing important work.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I mean, that instance, I remember that I was working at the conference office at the time, and I remember, I mean, it was all over. I just feel like that was the talk of the town for a little while because everyone was
the
shocked.
Front page of the newspaper.
Yeah, because like I feel like that's a good case of I think why it's so important as churches to be honest about where we stand, because a lot of people were going to that church thinking that like they believe this thing, and then they come out very anti-trans and transphobic, and everyone was shocked. I mean, there were some people who were like, yeah, but like most people were like, oh my God, like this is the church, like I, raised my kids here, like I got married here, like there's so much personhood tied in like where we seek our spiritual connection. And so I feel like it was really devastating for a lot of people.
And that church is like a big part of the community.
Massive
like I remember
part of the community.
Like Ragtag Cinema, like who that church was a huge sponsor of them, like broke their ties.
Oh, I
feel like a lot of people, like a lot of local places broke their funding from that church because which I think is super cool that a church is so like supportive of a city. I love that they were like that. But I also get like when you're honest about your takes, people are going to be mad.
Right.
And people are going to not want to be associated.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yes. Right? Yeah, because people definitely look at the neighborhood and they're like, I'm not going to be a part of that.
Including myself.
Right.
I'm really sorry.
No, that's okay. There would have been a point in time where I would have been like, you're going to hell. So, here we are. Made a full circle.
Yeah. It was really funny. Well, so I appreciate you taking time to chat with us. Like, I guess, say a student walks in to your ministry or like coffee shop, whatever, like you meet with them, and they are wrestling with questions about like what they know to be true about God from what they've experienced, what they've been told, like, which I think is at the heart of deconstruction, right? Like, and they're in a space where it's like, it sounds like Columbia is pretty eclectic in its theological makeup. Like, what would be your encouragement to that student? Like, and maybe if it's helpful, if they know you, like, what would you say to that person? Like, to encourage them to be like, hey, this is a long journey.
Right.
But how would you keep them going? Because I know for you, like, deconstruction can be really lonely, really isolating, can be really discouraging.
Yes.
And so, like, what would be your encouragement to that person? Because I imagine you're having those conversations on a regular basis.
I mean, I feel like I always start with the, like, affirmation that questions are valid and they're important, right? And I think for some people, and for myself included, I mean, I'm a very anxious person. And I think when I tended to be in my, like, more fundamentalist phase, it was because I wanted the security of answers, and I wanted to know exactly what rules I needed to follow and what that looked like and what that added up to be. And so I feel like for a lot of people, knowing that we're allowed to ask questions is like all of the permission you need, right?
Yeah.
Because then when we have that freedom to explore, we don't feel quite as guilty of being like, well, I'm a terrible Christian, right? Because I'm asking these questions. So I think that, like, through that permission, it's really important. And then also, I don't know, kind of like, for a lot of people, I think it's really helpful to kind of go back to the root of things of, like, okay, well, do you believe there, is a God? Sit with that one. And then, who do you believe that God to be? Or who do you not believe that God to be? I think that sometimes it's more helpful to name first what we don't think God is.
I think that's really true.
And then to, like, build from there. So I feel like those are a lot of the conversations I have is like, okay, well, what is God not? And then to, like, sort of rebuild a foundation from there.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you taking. This is one more coin in the piggy bank of getting to know you better. Right. So I appreciate this. Is fun.
Write it down.
Yeah.
In lieu of our typical recommendation section, I want to ask you rapid fire some of your favorite places in Columbia.
Oh, in Columbia?
For no one else will care, but I care.
Okay.
Favorite coffee shop.
I really love Shortwave. They have a new location where Caldy's used to be.
Shortwave is great.
Amazing.
Yeah. I was always a big fan of the Grind.
Which
I know is kind of like the aesthetics are strange, but I just loved it.
Yeah. Oh, there's a new goat. Oh, shoot. What's it called? Toasty Goat is so cute. If you're looking for aesthetic, Toasty Goat.
Favorite, like, restaurant.
Okay, Syrian Kitchen. It's, like, super new, kind of hole. It's phenomenal. Best Mediterranean food I think I've literally ever had in my life. Oh, my word. So, yeah, so good.
For breakfast, I was always in a Main Squeeze.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a classic.
They've changed it. Now it's like a store.
I hate that.
Yeah, I hate it so much because I'm vegetarian, and they were like one of the places that I feel like catered to. I was like, this is all for me. Yeah. And no. Now they just sell, like, prepackaged things. I mean, they sell a lot of cool merch, but I'm like, I wanted your BLT.
Right.
Damn it.
Okay,
Sorry,
final thing. Favorite bar.
Okay, I feel like I'm someone who kind of sticks to, I love Logboat dearly, and I really like iTap. I wasn't a college student in Columbia, so I feel like I missed out on all of the, like,
I'm gonna tell you
college places. Maddie has, like, helped take me around a few places, but now I feel a little too old, and then I'm like, I'm gonna run into my students here, and that's gonna be
weird. Where you're gonna
Social
need to go.
Room's actually pretty cool.
Honestly,
that's
Social
like kind
Room
of
is
become the gay bar of Columbia.
Yes.
And I love it.
Do you like?
So I feel more at home there.
I've done stand up several times there.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you like pickles?
The pickle shots?
Spicy pickle shots? Unreal.
Good. So good.
Also, have you been to Eastside Tavern?
Do they do karaoke sometimes?
Yes. That's the first place I ever did stand-up comedy.
Amazing.
Very special place to me.
Cool.
The vibes are strange. There's really old people there, so like, not that you're really old, but like you won't feel young.
It's fine. It's fine.
Maybe students like me on a podcast with Emily. You just told you're old for an hour.
My students call me Boomer all the time. I'm like, I'm technically Gen Z. I'm a cusper, but I'm Gen Z. So, yeah, thank you.
All right.
Yeah,
well, that's all. That was what I just wanted. That was just for me.
I like that. All right. Well, I appreciate being on. I just got we're at 40 minutes mark from Dustin.
Cool.
So we're going to take one more guest, but I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you guys.
We'll have to have you and Maddie on, maybe do a virtual episode. Like,
that would be cool.
I would love to talk more about your guys' podcast because I do think it's super dope. When you guys stopped making episodes, it was a loss in my life of things I wanted to consume.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it was a loss too. So we're hoping one day.
I will just say also, as guys a level of like brand. I loved your guys' branding and all that. I just thought it was really good.
Yeah, thank you.
So,
That's
all
one
right.
thing I'd like to pride myself in is my branding.
You're
But
good at it.
yeah, thank you.
So I appreciate you. This guy off here, switch mics with him. He's going to come
Great.
on next. But
All
thank
right,
you for
yeah,
joining
thank
us.
you guys. This is fun.
It's nice to meet you.
Yeah, so nice, Megan. No,
Emily? Really
I'm
close.
so sorry.
Okay.
Close. There was an M. Okay.
In an E.
You know, for an inclusive person, I've never felt more excluded than this Columbia conversation.
I just really needed to know.
What is, like, if you were going to say the best bar to go to get the cheapest drinks on one and then the best drinks in Columbia? Like, where's the best and where's the cheapest?
Cheapest Eastside Tavern, for sure. Typically, it's like $5 double wells,
Dang.
which is pretty nice.
Okay.
The best, I would say,
Sit down,
yes.
Steven.
There's a rooftop bar that I'm forgetting the name. It's like Pizzazz, but it's definitely not that.
Okay.
And I had like, it was like autumn, and I had this like spiced cider, and it was lovely.
Okay. I dig it.
But I don't remember what it's called. But it's the only one on the roof, so people will
Okay.
know.
So we got a new human between us. This is my
Hi,
buddy
I'm Steve.
Stephen Mitchell. Stephen, this is Emily Zell
Yeah, I didn't say my name.
from the Wells.
Emily Zell from the Well.
Rhymes. It's good.
So we do a podcast. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called the Deconstruction Zone. You're on it.
Oh.
And we talk life, faith, deconstruction. Steve and I had dinner last night at Dewey's. We were talking
Dewey slaps.
Dewey Slabs.
I need to say one thing about Dewey's.
Yeah.
My first time hosting at the Funny Bone, I opened for Kevin Farley, who's Chris Farley's
Yeah.
brother, and he tried Dewey's pizza and became obsessed and like demanded it every night of the show. And I
It's
thought that was
worth doing.
hilarious.
Yeah.
He was like, Dewey's pizza and some very specific water. And I was like, this is interesting.
Okay.
Anyway.
So last night we had dinner. We were talking about the Methodist Church. You and I were talking before. It's like, this is our conference. It just had a bunch of disaffiliations, like 73 churches,
Wow.
75,
Yeah.
and something like 16 churches closed, something like
Mhm.
that. So it's a big exodus, both of closures, which always happens with disaffiliations, creating a divide within the kind of conservative or progressive or moderate, whatever. But I just wonder, like, for you, because our state's diverse, you're in Nixa, which probably is like pretty diverse as far as like perspective of things, maybe. Maybe not.
Maybe not.
Maybe not, okay.
not. Yeah.
Well, so then are you more of a conservative area?
Yeah. I would say
Okay.
just the whole Springfield area
Okay.
is a little bit more conservative. I mean, it's not just conservative,
Yeah.
but that would be predominantly what the theology
Yeah.
would be, and politically.
Yeah. And you are probably like, I'm probably the crazy liberal, right? And you're the more moderate person, right?
I would agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, what is
Radically liberal.
radically
is
liberal
probably what I would say.
Radically inclusive.
Yeah, radically inclusive.
Um,
Yeah, that's what I meant.
But your context, like, it's more conservative, you're more moderate, but what is the conversation around deconstruction? Is there a conversation around deconstruction in Nixa, like in the Springfield area?
In the Springfield area, I'm not sure, but for us, I mean, I think deconstruction is healthy because it has you take a look at what's going on and why we do the things that we're doing and how we've done them in the past, and what's useful to pull from that, what's not so useful. I think part of our problem is when we do deconstruction and then we throw the baby out with the bathwater, and we try and get too much focus on how we can make things better or how we can change things, and not necessarily really looking at what the long-term shift will be, and if it's truly advantageous or if it's something that's going to be hurtful or harmful in the future. So I don't know that, I mean, when we talk, I think we constantly are talking about deconstruction within the church context, because we're talking about how we've done it all this time, and some of that has been horribly wrong and hurtful. And how do we change some of the language that we use? How do we speak to people in a way that lets them know that they're valued and important, regardless of their choices or who they are or what they've done? And so I think deconstruction is helpful in all facets of life, because it causes you to think. So.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that sounds a lot like the spirit of the Reformation. And like Martin Luther
Yeah.
said, reformed and always reforming. And I think sometimes we take more reformed churches will say like, all right, after Martin Luther, now we nailed it.
Yeah, we're reformed. and
Yeah,
done.
yeah, we're done.
Reformed and done.
All right, good.
And so I like what you're saying, because I think that
Yeah.
I think the spirit of that and the spirit of like Protestantism would be to just like always continue to be analyzing, like self-analyzing and seeing, are we doing what's best to like point people to Christ?
Well, I mean, that's the whole, to be very churchy, that's the whole process of sanctification, is that we're never satisfied with being where we are. We want to be more like Jesus in every aspect that we do. So how do we, like, if we're not just deconstruction on systems and things like that in the world, but like, where am I on this? And how can I, like, where are my biases or my hang-ups that are keeping me from being more like Jesus and caring for people more like Jesus? Where are those things getting in the way? And how can I truly kind of take those apart so that I can be the person that Jesus wants me to be, instead of, just broken Steve. So
well, and to me, sanctification would be you becoming the truest version of Steve.
Right.
Like,
the one that Jesus
Steve.
knows. Yeah, glorify. I think I'm gonna get a shirt that says that. That's gonna be glorified Steve.
I just really believe that.
Yeah, but I think
sanctification isn't letting go of yourself as much as it's becoming yourself, and I think that shift is really important. Even when we think about like looking internally and looking personally, is that me getting to know myself. I think not that I'm the perfect version, but like that is part of me getting to know the truest version of Emily and glorified Emily. Yeah, and
sometimes, I mean, while you say it's hard, it's not letting go. Some of that is letting go of the brokenness that we carry, the things that we've done, that kind of stuff. But that's where I'm speaking in we. Truly, that's where I struggle a lot. Is, I want to give Jesus all of this stuff, but some of this stuff I'm still holding on to pretty dang tightly. And so how do I like the dude talking to Jesus, I believe, help my unbelief. How do I let go of some of that so that I can be more of who Jesus wants me to be? So
you said that your like main like fear of maybe the deconstruction or people deconstructing to a point, maybe that's not the right word, is the idea of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So if you felt like you saw someone in your congregation that was deconstructing and they got to a point where you're like, that's not water anymore, that's baby, like what would you say?
I think we can take a look at you brought up the Reformation. Some of the things that were thrown out in the Reformation, I think really could have been beneficial for the kingdom. I think the idea...
Totally kidding.
No. Yes, because then I could pay for my building. No.
Let's start
Strike that.
Emily's very pro indulgence.
Started today at annual conference. Methodist indulgences.
Not okay. I did not say that.
This will make
Steve
TikTok.
TikTok.
Whoever's like the president of the United Methodist Church is going to shut down this pod so fast.
No, I'm trying to get the bishop on him. I showed him a personal message. Asked him to come and join us.
He's gonna say no.
Especially after this conversation.
But when, like, for example, going in, oh my gosh,
I'm sorry.
This is so good. But going in and having confession, the idea of being able to confess openly and truthfully your sins, not so that you know what you need to do to get better, but so that you can do some of that. So, we have some history of that. If I see somebody, and it happens all the time, like people get hung up on tradition over Jesus.
Yeah.
Like we've always done it this way, so we can't make any changes. And so then you'll have somebody that comes in and is like, oh no, we have to change everything because that's not helpful. And so you got to be able to find a happy medium where you can recognize that things need to change.
Yeah.
They just don't have to change all in a moment. Where we kind of all want them to change immediately, but I don't think in order to bring about the most transformation, not just transformation for one small group, but so that everybody makes that journey, you have to kind of find that happy medium and work with people to say, hey, maybe yes, you're on the right path, but we need to slow down, pump the brakes a little bit so that everybody else can catch up and be informed and understand why we're doing some of that stuff. Now, some of it, that's easy to say within the church context. Absolutely. In a social context, it's a little bit more difficult.
For sure.
Because like when you talk about racism, no, we need to stop that. There's no pumping the brakes and we should all communicate a little bit. And it's okay if you hate people a little bit. No, none of that's okay. We need to stop that.
Clip out.
Yeah, there you go. We need to stop all of that. So how do we, do not take that clip out.
Send it to the bishop.
Context Steve just got fired from the United Methodist Church. Anyway, trying to figure out a way to understand which pieces need to move in a slower pace and which ones need to happen immediately is that's the tricky part of deconstruction. I think in a church context of because we still are dealing with people that treat women as a lesser group of people. We still have people that struggle and struggle is the wrong term, that are racist and don't to me that kind of thing is it's like why are we still dealing with it? We should be past that. So how do we quickly deconstruct some things, but then
it's like a tension between like pace and patience and some of that. So you were going to say something that
I want to play devil's advocate for you for a second.
Knock it out.
Specifically in a church context, I want to go back to your confession idea. I went to Catholic school for 2 weeks.
2 whole weeks?
Yeah. And then I was like, I'm not dealing with this unreformed stuff. That is not a joke at all.
These pagans, they're freaking me out.
I was like, my theology teacher was like, well, some of us are still pretty mad about the Reformation. And I was like, well, I did the Reformation polka growing up, so suck it. Tax law bills, indulgences, and transubstantiation.
All right, come on.
Okay.
Keep moving.
But
did
so
we
the
just
idea
go to
of
a musical?
I think we did.
It's awesome.
It is awesome. But what I was going to say is with the idea of confession and that in the Catholic belief, what I was taught for 2 weeks is that
2 whole weeks.
I know. Is that you have to, the priest is kind of the mediator to God. And so
that's problematic.
It is problematic. And so what I think maybe the idea of not taking the baby out with the bathwater is to say you can confess straight to God, but also confession and community is helpful. But what I'm wondering is I think sometimes throwing the baby out with the bathwater in instances like that is helpful in a sense to almost reset your brain. Because I think it'd be really hard to be let's take out this aspect, but you're still conditioned to think one way. So you almost need to take out confession at all.
That's kind of the whole Protestant movement, right? We had the Lutheran Church was formed and they went this far. And then you had a group of people that were like, well, y'all didn't go far enough. And so we're going to go further. And y'all didn't go far enough. And now we have to rebaptize and we have to do all of these things. So for me, the idea of confession is this, there is very rarely is there a place where you feel safe enough that you will go and you will say, this is all of the dark, dirty stuff that I've done. And so you carry that around with you.
Yeah.
And you feel a little bit of guilt. And I think that in the confessional sense,
I got another confession to make.
Of being able to tell somebody or being expected to tell somebody, hey, these are the things that I've done. Now, I think the broken side of that is definitely, we have a mediator, and that's Jesus. We don't need a pastor to tell us or a priest to tell us what we should do so that we can get to a good place. We need somebody that will say, I hear what you've said. You're forgiven by God, not by me.
Right.
But you need to work on living differently and, move past that. I think that I just love the idea of being able to have a safe space where people feel comfortable saying, hey, this is some of the stuff that I've done and I need some help with that. Because I think that's what we're lacking. So when I say throw on the baby, I don't think we did it wrong. I truly don't. I just think that sometimes in the moment, we're getting rid of stuff that could still be beneficial in a different way. At that time, it could not be beneficial.
That's what I'm saying.
Because in the Reformation, it was still problematic because it was too much the expectation at that point in time was that if you go to confession, they're going to tell you what you need to do to receive absolution.
Right. So you need to get.
So you have to get past it. It's kind of like when you're doing a new church launch in an old church building, you have to close that thing so that all of the former beliefs and understandings can die, so that then it can be resurrected into something new. So, which is deconstruction. So there you go.
Love it.
Well, so
I'm
Stephen,
good at this.
You two wouldn't know this, but before we started recording, I was talking to Dustin, our producer, who you do know, Dustin. But I was talking, and he's like, "All right, so we need to keep this at 30 minutes. I think we're at an hour."
There you go.
So I'm gonna wrap this, but I do appreciate you coming on. Like Stephen and I, one of my good friends, for a lot of reasons, one of them would be like, we're in a denomination right now that's dividing and friendships are breaking because people divide over issues. And one of the things, Stephen and I don't agree on everything. And there are things we don't disagree on. And I would say like, one of the things I appreciate is like, we've made a covenant, like we're going to be friends through disagreement. And like, we've seen friends eject friendships, like throw out people, throw the baby out in the bathwater relationship wise. Yeah. And that's one of the things I appreciate about you is I think we feel, and I'm putting words in your mouth, that I feel at least strongly, we're better together, and I appreciate like your friendship in this. So
I just figure you think I make you look better.
You do.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do.
I'm your ugly friend. It's
yeah.
good.
Yeah, I'm your ugly friend. So,
well, it was super nice to meet you.
Nice to
chat. It was
with
great
brother.
hanging out with you. Thanks for letting me
Excited to
crash
hang out
your
with
party.
Glorified Steve one day.
You're doing it right now, sister.
Right.
We're working on it.
Thanks, Steve. All right, Emily. So I want to wind this down, just time-wise.
Yes.
So, based on our conversation, like what has been your take of Methodist lay and clergy people in this conversation?
Honestly, just even more like open-minded and thoughtful and like willing to engage in deconstruction than I expected. Not that I've had a bad experience in the UMC church, but I just like, I guess I kind of thought, I didn't know. I was like, maybe the Well's like on the edge of like being cool, and everyone else is like,
and you're like,
cool.
they're all cool. We're not edgy at all.
right. And that was just, it just was really encouraging. As we said at the beginning of this, like this space feels very similar to a space I've been in previously and would not have these conversations. Yeah. And so honestly, just like it's been very powerful to me to do this today.
I dig it.
I've really enjoyed it.
Well, my guess is, and anyone listening or watching, you would know this because you've made it this far. This is likely a 2-part episode.
I think it should be.
Based on how long it is, but we appreciate you sticking. I've enjoyed these conversations, like Stephen, Reeves, Maddie, and Chris. Like I think having those conversations, all people that occupy very unique spaces.
Yes.
And we didn't even get into Stephen's personal story, but like he, like Chris, has a lot of life before Jesus.
Love it.
If you chat with him, like his story is really, really interesting. But that's what I appreciate. Like some people are lifelong Christians, lifelong Methodists, 150-year-old churches, brand new churches, college town, city, rural. But I think it's like we're all wrestling with some level of this conversation. And I dig that.
I dig that too. And I've loved that we've gotten to do this today.
Yeah. Well, send us out, sister.
All right. Well, everybody, thanks for listening and joining us at MUMC Annual Conference. And always remember to embrace the journey.
It's actually MOAC.